Demonstration: Proactive Threat Detection, IBM Spectrum Scale with SPLUNK Enterprise. Key terminologies: Data. Data is the new crown jewel and directly influences continuous delivery of business. Cyber resiliency. C refers to a business ability to continuously deliver the intended outcome despite adverse cyber events. IBM Spectrum Scale is the leading software-defined storage, file and object storage used for cloud, big data, analytics, and more use cases. SPLUNK Enterprise. SPLUNK is the fastest way to aggregate, analyze, and get answers from your machine data, your log data, and shows you real-time visibility. IBM Spectrum Scale and IBM SPLUNK integration flow. We have an IBM Spectrum Scale file system which has been enabled for file audit logging. We will have users accessing the files. All the file audit logging will be recorded and will be available on an immutable file set. We will forward all these Spectrum Scale file audit logging to SPLUNK Enterprise. There will be rules written by the SPLUNK Enterprise to detect for internal threats or in general threats. When there is a threat detected, an alert will be shown on a SPLUNK Enterprise dashboard. So this demonstration will show you this integration. So what's the use case for the demo? In an organization, if a given risky user accesses a file, that file could be a confidential file or an intellectual property file. We will categorize that file and keep it under a confidential file set or a directory hosted on IBM Spectrum Scale. And we should be able to see that IBM SPLUNK Enterprise should trigger a potential threat and generate an alert. Now this is a very basic demonstration of the capability. Practitioners of SPLUNK Enterprise as well as SPLUNK Enterprise Security can actually create more advanced rules so that advanced threat detection capabilities can be implemented with the integration of Spectrum Scale file audit logging with SPLUNK Enterprise or SPLUNK Enterprise Security. Let's get to the demo. I already have a Spectrum Scale file system configured. This is my basic 3-node Spectrum Scale cluster. I have enabled this cluster for file auditing of Spectrum Scale, which is a feature available with Spectrum Scale 5.x release. This command is showing that I have enabled file audit logging for file system FS1, where the file access logs are being stored in FS1 file set and the retention period is 365. This command is showing that we have enabled file audit logging as yes for file system 1, which means all the file access that happens on file system FS1 will be logged. So let us see where we have mounted the file system. The file system has been mounted on IBM FS1. Now this indicates that all the file access logs, all the access to files will be logged. So let's go to the file system. Now that we have the basic Spectrum Scale file system already, we need to make sure that we forward these file access logs to the SPLUNK system. So the way to forward that is by configuring rsyslog. So I will show you here. If you see, we have configured rsyslog such that all the file access logs that are written in the file set is forwarded to the SPLUNK host. SPLUNK-host is the name of the system which is hosting the SPLUNK Enterprise software, and 515 is the port, the syslog port where we will be forwarding the rsyslog. So once we configure this, all the file access logs from Spectrum Scale file system will be forwarded to SPLUNK Enterprise. Now to start with the test, we would want to have a, let's say, a malicious user or a user which is a risky user that you want to monitor him. So I've created a test user and I suit as a test user. So now this particular is a user whom you want to monitor. Let us make a note of his UID. The test user has a UID of 2005. Now what we want to do, we have two sets of directories. We have a set of non-confidential directory and we have a set of confidential directory. What we want to achieve is whenever the test user accesses files in confidential directory, Splunk should raise an alert that test user is accessing files in confidential directory. And if he accesses files in non-confidential directory, there should be no alert generated. So now that we have file access audit enabled, let's go to Splunk. This is where you will land when you open Splunk at the home screen. We have enabled the syslog for the Splunk system so that it can receive the messages coming from our syslog on Spectrum Scale, which can be found under settings in data inputs. So if you go to data inputs, you go to TCP. Here you will see that port 515 has been enabled so that the RSys log from Spectrum Scale, which is forwarding the log, is accepted by Splunk. Now let's go to the home screen and let us see whether the Spectrum Scale file access logs are coming here or not. So you click data summary on Splunk. People who are actually used to Splunk, the Splunk administrators or practitioners, would know all of this. I selected a host. This host maps to the host from where we are forwarding the file access logs. So it's a filter, and here you see these are all the file access logs coming from Spectrum Scale file system. So far we are able to get the file access log from Spectrum Scale onto Splunk. Now the next task is for us to write a rule such that the test user, if he accesses confidential file, we have to raise an alert. A very simple vanilla use case. So in order to do that, there is a concept of fields where you have to map fields in your logs to specific field names. This is a Splunk concept, and for more information you can go to the Splunk documentation. I have already mapped the fields. Here you say cluster name, SSA time, which is the access time, which will map to the access time in Spectrum Scale file access logs or audit logs, SS path, which will map to the path which is being accessed, SS user ID, and user UID, which will map to the UID of the user who is accessing the particular file. So I've done some of these mapping with the file audit logging, which is pretty straightforward as per the Splunk documentation. Now in order to write the rule, we will do the following. Now this is a new search. What it is saying that only display the file audit logs which have come from this particular host, which belongs to the Spectrum Scale cluster from where we are forwarding the audit logs using rsyslogd. The user ID 2005, which is the test user, and the path, SS path, should be confidential. So Splunk, we are telling Splunk, why don't you search only for entries that match to this. So you run that, and then the next thing we do is let's change and make it real time. This means that only in real time we should be able to see the results. Now to see whether the search is working on Splunk, let us go back. We are the same user, the test user with UID 2005. Let us go to the confidential directory. We go to the confidential directory, we do ls, and let us do a cat on the confidential file. So the test user with UID 2005 has touched a confidential file. Let's go back to Splunk, and if you see, he has started detecting that user ID 2005 has accessed a confidential directory. So he has now in real time started shortlisting the rule that we want. Now in order for it to generate an alert, let's save this as alert. When you save this as alert, you will say alert admin of potential threat from test user. Description: take necessary action by admin, and we schedule it for real time. Let's say we keep this for 1 month. For example, let us say the test user is flagged to be monitored for 1 month, so we will monitor that for 1 month, and we will say trigger alert when. So this we will say let triggers whenever such results are hit. There's an option of throttling, which is also an important option, but we will not use it for now. And what action should we take? We will say add to trigger alerts, right? So it's going to add an alert, and we will say which alert to add. So we can say give a high alert, and we save. And now we have saved it. Now we should be able to see an alert when a potential threat happens. So let us go back, and as the same user try and get the confidential file. We see here that Splunk has able to detect that there is an access, and we will go to its activities and alerts, and in alerts you can see there is an alert that has come saying alert admin for potential threat from test user. In real time, it's a high alert, which is an alert that we had configured. So this demonstration shows that you can actually configure Spectrum Scale file audit logging with Splunk Enterprise to do potential threat detection. What I showed you is a very basic demo, but this can be extrapolated with good Splunk Enterprise skill sets to do a lot more deeper threat detection. Thank you.